Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about the serious issues in the media topic for the Friends and Gilmore Girls TBR, which is age gap relationships. I have a whole TBR that I read to go along with this theme, but I'm reviewing the books in another video because I haven't finished reading all of them yet. So that video will be out at a later date. This video is slated to be posted on March 28th at 5 p.m. The reason why I am making this video now is because Kathleen and I watched this episode last Saturday. Season 4, episode 10, The Nanny and the Professor, in which Paris starts to date her teacher, Asher Fleming. Okay, I want to preface this video by saying I am not a therapist. I just like to somewhat overanalyze relationships of my favorite TV characters. I have also mentioned in previous videos how I think that Paris could be related to Monica and Ross because she exhibits similar personality traits to both of them. And I feel like Monica and Ross probably went to Ivy League colleges in the previous generation to when this show was on. So Gilmore Girls was on from 2000 to 2007, and Friends was on from 1994 to 2004. So my guess is that Monica and Ross went to like Harvard or Yale or one of the NYU colleges from 19 so wait Monica was wait so Ross was in college in like the late 80s, right? Him and Chandler were in their sophomore or junior year during the flashback episodes when they were in college, and Monica is like 3 years younger than them because in the flashback episode she was a senior in high school because they went to their senior prom in the prom video episode. So I'm guessing that if Ross and Monica and Rachel and Chandler are all in their mid-20s by the time Friends starts in 1994, then okay, so Ross was a sophomore or junior in 1987, which means he graduated in 1989, and then Monica and Rachel were seniors in high school during that time, so that would mean that Ross is 3 years older than Monica. Please tell me if I'm figuring out these ages correctly, because I might be guessing wrong, and I'm pretty bad at math, but Ross probably graduated when he was 21 or 22 and then went to grad school because he has his PhD and he's a professor, and he also works at the Museum of Natural History in New York in the dinosaur exhibit. So I'm guessing that he went to college to study natural sciences, paleontology, and then he probably went to college to get his he went to graduate school to get his master's in teaching. Monica's a chef, so she probably went to culinary school. I don't remember if there's a culinary college in New York City or not, but if she went to Ivy League school like Harvard or Yale, she probably went there to study the business aspect of running a restaurant, because by the end of the series she's a chef. And then we know Chandler starts off in the show in a job in statistical analysis and data reconfiguration. It's not known what he went to college to study exactly, but he probably studied math and business if he's in a career in facts and figures that involves that and then later in the show he gets a job in advertising, which he could have gone back to school to get a degree in potentially. That is never really known, because he ends up not realizing he doesn't like the job in statistical analysis data reconfiguration. So Monica encouraged him to leave it and do something he's passionate about, which is the advertising. And then Rachel, as we all know, is into fashion. So she probably went to college at the Fashion Institute of Technology, which I think is in New York City. And then Paris and Rory go to Yale in the early to mid 2000s. They start college in 2003. They graduate in 2007. That was around the same time I was in college. So when this show was on, Gilmore Girls, when this show was on originally, I was in the same age range as Rory and Paris, but I was a year behind them because I graduated high school in 2004. So that's why I wish I had watched this show while I was in high school, because I feel like at the time, if I had watched that show back then, I would have really connected to the characters a lot more. But instead, I watched Friends, which had more adult characters in it, which I could relate to in certain situations as a teenager, as I have mentioned before in several previous videos. The characters I connect to the most on Friends are Phoebe, Chandler, and Monica for different reasons, and you can go back to watch my old character analysis videos where I go into more detail of how I connect to these characters, because we are talking about age gap relationships today. This topic is a topic that is really interesting to me, because as I said in the opening, I think that Paris has a lot of similar personality traits to Monica and Ross, and that's why I think they could have been related. And my theory was that Monica and Chandler's dad fought in the war with Paris's grandfather or father. They know each other somehow, and through fighting in the war. That is the backstory that I have given to Paris on how she connects to Chandler and Monica. So for those of you who haven't seen this Gilmore Girls episode in a while, freshman year, Richard is visiting. It opens with Richard visiting Paris and Rory at college and reminiscing about his college days. And then his friend Asher, who is one of the professors at the college, comes over to the table to say hello. He introduces them to Paris and Rory. And Paris is immediately infatuated by him and like asks him to set up a meeting with her to do an interview for the newspaper for an article she's doing. And then in the side plot of this episode, it's about Suki raising her kids, and the old manager from the Independence Inn who worked in the daytime, his name is Tobin. Jackson and Suki hire them as their nanny, and he's a male nanny, much like Sandy was supposed to be in Friends, but I think that whole thing is handled a lot better, though I don't think that Tobin is necessarily a gay character. He doesn't, and to be fair, Sandy was not gay either, but Ross just made an assumption that he was, which wasn't a very nice thing for him to do. So, as the story goes along, we realize that Paris ends up getting into a relationship with her teacher, Asher Fleming, and as part of my research for this video, I actually emailed the actress who played Paris on Instagram and asked her how she felt about her character dating an older man, because in a video that I watched on YouTube by Pensive Whiskers, Marina, who is the person who made that YouTube video, she said, or maybe it was in the comments, I can't remember if she said this in her video herself or somebody in the comments said it, but it was mentioned that the actor who played Asher did not like this plot line of Asher dating an older man, dating his student, because it was pretty gross. Because please keep in mind here, Asher is the same age as Rory's grandfather, and he's 65. He's in his 60s. Paris is supposed to be 19, and let me just say that in her video, Marina at Pensive Whiskers also mentioned that Asher dates a new freshman student every single year, which is so gross. So I don't know how Gilmore Girls managed to get away with doing a plotline like that, because he's perverted and he should have been fired. It's even so much worse than Ross and Elizabeth in Friends, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. So Rory after the football game is over, Rory catches Paris kissing Asher, and she gets really uncomfortable about approaching her about the fact that they're together, because she doesn't want to like stir the pot. She's very she doesn't like confrontation. She's a lot like me. Like when I was faced with issues in the past where I had to confront a person, I had really bad anxiety about dealing with that, and Rory shows that here. So she goes to talk to her mom about how uncomfortable she feels with Paris dating Asher. And I think Lorelai is a little bit distracted by everything that goes on with opening up the end to really be engaged in that conversation very much, which makes me feel bad, because Rory's actually looking for guidance in this situation, and I don't think she was really focused. I don't think Lorelai was very focused on that. So Paris is obviously very distracted by this new relationship with Asher. Paris and Rory are on the newspaper together, and Paris leaves the meeting because Asher calls her on the phone in the middle of the meeting. She leaves the meeting. Rory makes an excuse to Doyle, who is the guy in charge of the Yale Daily News, that Paris had a family emergency and she had to leave, but really it was probably Asher on the phone asking to set up a date. So obviously Rory keeps getting put into these uncomfortable situations where she has to cover for Paris because she doesn't want to get caught and have rumors spread around with her dating her teacher. And this also puts Rory in a very uncomfortable position because Asher is her political literature teacher, and on the first day of class, he goes up to say, "Hey, and I know you. We have a connection." And I almost turned red when I was in that scene because I thought he was gonna say Paris's name, but no. Thankfully, he said Richard's name instead, which I thought was good because that would have, if I was Rory in that situation, I would have like buried my face into my shirt collar if he had mentioned that he knew that he was friends with Paris and he knew that they were together. Okay, so there are 3 age gap relationships in Friends: Monica and Richard, Ross and Elizabeth, which is the most pertinent relationship that connects to this situation in Gilmore Girls, and Frank Jr. and Alice. Frank Jr. and Alice is the most disgusting relationship in the whole entire show. For those of you who do not remember, Frank Jr. is Phoebe's half-brother, who is played by Giovanni Ribisi, and he is supposed to be 16 years old, and he's in love with his home economics teacher, who is played by Deborah Jo Rupp, who plays Kitty Foreman on that 70s show and that 90s show. Their romance is particularly disturbing because their age gap is so great. I did the math on these age gaps. And I have it written down right here. The gap between Frank Jr. and Alice is 28 years because Frank Jr. is 16 and Alice is 44. The age gap between Ross and Elizabeth is 12 years because Elizabeth is 20. And I'm pretty sure Ross is 32 by the beginning of season 6, by the middle part of season 6, but I could be wrong. Monica and Richard, the age gap is 21 years. Monica is 26 in season 1 of Friends, and Richard is 67, the same age as her dad, Jack. Now, there's an interesting theory that I have seen circulating around Instagram that Jack is actually not really Monica's dad. And if you go all the way back to season 1, episode 2, the one with the sonogram at the end, when Ross finds out that Carol is pregnant, Judy Geller alludes to the fact that she might have had Monica out of an affair, and further fan speculation persists that Monica's dad could possibly be Richard. I don't know if this is true or not. I hope it isn't, because that would really make Monica's relationship with Richard kind of almost like he's a predator, because you have to think about Richard and Jack have been friends for many, many years, and he saw Monica and Ross grow up as kids and probably help Jack and Judy change their diapers and all that kind of thing. So that's what kind of creeps me out about that fan theory. It really makes me hope it isn't true. I don't think it is, but I did base a whole fan fiction off of the possibility of Richard being Monica's dad, which was interesting to write. I also messaged Courtney Cox on Instagram to ask her if she got any pushback from other fans about Monica dating Richard and their age gap, but no response from her. Hopefully she will eventually respond to me. This video will be going out on March 28th. So she and Liza Wheel, who played Paris, may or may not respond by then. I hope they do. If they do, I will leave a comment on the video and tag it to let you know what they said, or just make a small addendum video. So I want to hear your theories in the comments as to why Paris would date her teacher. My thought is, okay, so we have seen in the seasons where she's at Chilton Academy that Paris does not have the best family life. She was basically raised by her nanny because her parents were absent and very neglectful. In season 2, her parents get divorced, and it doesn't really seem like Paris had a great relationship with either of her parents. But specifically in related to her relationship with Asher, she has daddy issues, obviously, because she didn't have a steady father figure in her life, because her parents were always traveling and never home, and she was raised by her nanny. And her dad was probably a really angry person if her parents got divorced. I'm just assuming this. I don't really know. I wish there had been more backstory given to the whole thing with Paris's parents getting divorced and what led up to it, because that would have been interesting to know. Because as you see in flashback episodes of Friends, it talks about the Thanksgiving episode where Chandler finds out his parents are divorcing, and that gave interesting insight into Chandler's character and why he is so bitter towards his dad for abandoning his family. The next age gap relationship in Friends and Gilmore Girls I wanted to talk about is, of course, the one I've talked about in many previous videos, Ross and Elizabeth. This age gap is less egregious than the other 3 that I have mentioned, because as I just said, Elizabeth is 20 and Ross is 32, so that's a 12-year. I'm estimating that Ross is 32. So I saw this post on Facebook a couple of days ago that was about an interview the actress who played Elizabeth gave about this whole storyline, and she said she really didn't like the whole plot line with Ross dating Elizabeth, and she was really grossed out by the fact that Elizabeth dated her teacher, which I'm glad she said something about that, because, okay, so this episode first aired in 2001. I was in eighth grade or ninth grade, and I remember being skeptical about Ross dating his student when I first watched this episode series. This episode set of 3 episodes. So the reason why I like this episode arc is because it's the episode where it's the set of episodes where Bruce Willis guest stars as Elizabeth's dad, Paul, who dates Rachel for a little bit. And I really love the chemistry that was actually between Paul and Rachel during the brief time that they dated. But Paul threatens to get Ross fired from NYU because of dating his daughter, and I wish he had followed through with that because he deserved to get fired, because he was pretty much old enough to be her dad. Ross was old enough to be Elizabeth's dad, is what I'm saying. And so in this analysis video I watched by The Take about Ross's toxic traits, they say that he seeks fits of pleasure. And I think Ross's issues with relationships really stem from how Carol cheated on him with Susan and a divorce and everything. So that's why he has so much issues with relationships. He even says this to Rachel and explains that not being fully over Carol completely is the reason why he was so jealous of her dating Mark, and what leads him to be like obsessive and possessive of her in that episode. What fit of pleasure exactly did Ross get from dating Elizabeth? Going to spring weekend in Florida with her and being on MTV? Because, I mean, there's a scene where they're all in the apartment watching TV, and Joey points at the TV and he's like, hey, look, isn't that Ross next to Elizabeth? And everybody else gathers around TV and is like, oh yeah. So I wasn't really a big fan of the Ross and Elizabeth thing, and the only good thing about that set of episodes is Bruce Willis, and it's so sad because, as you all probably know if you pay attention to articles in the newspaper, Bruce Willis has been suffering with frontal temporal lobe dementia since 2022. So I have been following his health issues because, I mean, I can connect to what his family is going through because, as I've said, I have lost family members due to Alzheimer's and dementia. So I do not know these people personally, but I feel connected to them in this way because of what they're going through with their family member having dementia. Have these episodes of Friends and Gilmore Girls aged well? No, especially the episodes with Frank Jr. and Alice. Those have aged very poorly because of how huge that age gap is. I personally think that Alice is pretty predatory to date her 16-year-old student who she knows is going through a rough time in his life because his dad abandoned him, his mother committed suicide, and he lives with his stepmom. So how do I rate these episodes? The whole Frank and Alice storyline, in the beginning when they first start to date, I'm not too crazy about it. And Phoebe is even uncomfortable with the fact that they want to get married too, and she tries to break them up, which gets Frank Jr. mad at her. But I really love the surrogacy storyline for Phoebe giving birth to the triplets for Frank and Alice. And briefly, I just want to talk about a book I just finished called The Names, because it connects to the episode where Phoebe is asked to give a name to one of the twins, and she's talking to Joey and Chandler about potentially naming one of the triplets after them. And Chandler freaks out because he hates his name. He hates his first name. He hates his last name. He totally wants to change his name. So he actually goes through going to the courthouse to get it changed. And then Phoebe talks him out of it because Chandler is a great name. I should know this because I have a friend named Chandler. One of my friends from New Hampshire is named Chandler. And in the video where I review the names, I actually go into a little bit more detail about this mental breakdown that Chandler has about his name. So I give Frank and Alice's storyline probably 5.5 out of 10. For Ross and Elizabeth, I have a breakdown of how I rated those episodes written down here. Let me tell you how I rated them. I don't have that written down. I thought I did. I must have it just written down on the blog post, but I believe I gave the one where Ross dates a student 4 stars, the one where Ross meets Elizabeth's dad 6.5, and the one where Paul is the man 8. And after dividing those by 3, I gave it all 3 episode arc gets 7.5 out of 10. And then for Monica and Richard, how do I rate their episodes? Okay, so I'm kind of iffy about Monica and Richard because when I was younger, I really enjoyed them as a couple. But then when I started to rewatch this series as an adult in 2023, I don't know. I was a little bit icked out by the fact that they were dating and talking about marriage and having kids when they're such a big... And Richard even says how he already has kids and grandkids, and how if him and Monica have kids together, he's not going to live to see the kids go to college because he's already really old. So Monica and Richard date from season 1 to season 2. They break up during the episode where it's Barry and Mindy's wedding, and they briefly get back together. Although I don't know if you would call that getting back together. In season 3, episode 13, the one where Monica and Richard are just friends. I give their whole relationship arc 5 out of 10. And then with Paris and Asher, I've only seen this one episode so far, but so I can't really rank the whole episode arc because I haven't seen all the episodes with them dating, but I do not like where things are gonna go because I think it's gross, and we already know from research that Asher dates a new freshman student every year and that he should be locked up. So what did you think of these episodes? Do you think these age gap relationship plots in Friends and Gilmore Girls have aged well? Please weigh down in the comments. I really am interested to hear what you think. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.